Welcome to Simply Mindful. I am your host, Maya. In our journey together today, we are going to explore one of the most transformative shifts a human being can experience within the landscape of their own mind. It is the profound transition from being lost in the turbulent currents of our thoughts to becoming the silent, steady observer of those very thoughts. Instead of being the thought itself, we learn how to see the thought. To truly grasp this concept, I want you to invite a simple yet powerful visualization into your mind. Imagine yourself standing calmly on the sidewalk of a very busy metropolitan street. The vehicles rushing past you, the cars, the buses, the speeding motorcycles, each one of them represents a distinct thought, a fleeting emotion, or a visceral sensation arising within your consciousness. For most of us, our default state of being is quite different. Whenever a car speeds by, we subconsciously jump into it. We find ourselves in the passenger seat or even at the wheel, being driven away to a destination we didn't choose. This is what it means to be hijacked by your own mind. We become so entangled with the narrative of the thought that we lose ourselves in it completely. But through the dedicated practice of mindfulness, we develop the capacity to step back. We learn to maintain our position on the sidewalk, watching the traffic of our mind flow past without the compulsive need to board every single vehicle that appears. This act of observing, this simple seeing, is fundamentally different from being inside the car. In the realm of neuroscience and psychology, we refer to this higher-order cognitive process as meta-awareness. Meta-awareness is, quite literally, the awareness of being aware. It is the moment you realize you are thinking while the thought is still occurring. Think of it as that startling yet liberating moment when you wake up from a vivid dream. Inside the dream, the fear felt real, the excitement was palpable, and the logic, however distorted, seemed absolute. But the second you wake up, you realize, oh, that was just a dream. The content of the dream hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has shifted entirely. Seeing your thoughts works exactly the same way. The thoughts will continue to arise. That is simply what the brain does. But you begin to cultivate a crucial sense of psychological distance. You start to recognize that these mental events are merely transient phenomena within the mind. They are not the ultimate truth, and they are certainly not the essence of who you are. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to obey them. You only need to acknowledge their presence as psychological occurrences. When we create this space, we move from a state of reactivity to a state of conscious response. We find a new internal territory where we have the freedom to decide how much power we give to any particular thought. From a neurobiological perspective, this isn't just a philosophical idea, it is a measurable change in how your brain functions. When we engage in mindfulness, we are effectively rewiring our neural circuitry. Research consistently shows that this practice strengthens the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC. This is the sophisticated CEO of your brain, responsible for executive functions, complex decision-making, and self-regulation. When the PFC is fortified, its connectivity with the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, becomes much more efficient. This enhanced communication allows you to detect an emotional surge or a runaway thought pattern much faster than before. You catch the impulse before it turns into an action. Furthermore, we see a significant shift in the default mode network, or the DMN. This is the network that becomes hyperactive when our minds wander, often leading us into the dark alleys of rumination and self-criticism. In a state of meta-awareness, the DMN's activity decreases, quieting that internal background noise. We also observe changes in the posterior cingulate cortex, or the PCC. This region is heavily involved in self-referential processing, the endless me, myself, and I narrative. When the PCC's grip loosens, we find it much easier to break free from those repetitive toxic loops of "I'm not good enough" or "Why does this always happen to me?" To help anchor this further, consider another profound metaphor: the relationship between the clouds and the sky. In our daily lives, we often mistake ourselves for the clouds. If a dark, heavy cloud of sadness drifts in, we say, "I am sad." We identify so strongly with the emotion that we become the weather. But through mindfulness and meta-awareness, we begin to realize that we are not the clouds. We are the sky. The sky is the vast, expansive container that allows the clouds to exist. There are fluffy white clouds of joy, gray clouds of worry, and violent thunderheads of anger. But no matter how intense the storm, the sky itself remains untouched. The sky is never stained, never broken, and never diminished by the weather passing through it. Practicing mindfulness is the process of remembering your own sky-like nature. It is returning to that vast, unchanging space of awareness, rather than getting lost in the temporary identity of a passing cloud. Becoming the sky, observing without judgment, without the desperate need to chase the clouds away, has profound implications for how we handle stress in our modern lives. Chronic stress is rarely just about external circumstances. More often, it is fueled by our internal entrapment. We get caught in a feedback loop of negative projections and what-if scenarios, playing them over and over without even realizing we are doing it. Meta-awareness is like having a pause button for your nervous system. The moment a financial worry or a social anxiety arises, instead of spiraling for hours, you see it instantly. You label it, "Oh, there is a thought about financial insecurity." By simply noting it and observing it without adding fuel to the fire, you break the cycle. You refuse to be a slave to the narrative. You remain the sky, watching the storm pass. When we successfully embody the vastness of the sky and allow the clouds of our thoughts to drift by without judgment or resistance, the impact on our daily stress management is nothing short of revolutionary. In our contemporary world, the chronic stress that so many of us navigate daily isn't merely a byproduct of external pressures or a demanding environment. More often than not, it is fueled by a psychological phenomenon known as cognitive fusion. Cognitive fusion occurs when we become so entangled with our internal narratives that we cannot distinguish between a thought and reality. We don't just have a thought, we become the thought. We find ourselves trapped in a relentless cycle of rumination, a repetitive, unproductive loop of negative thinking that keeps our nervous system in a state of constant high alert. However, when we cultivate a robust sense of meta-awareness, it's as if we have reclaimed the remote control to our own neural architecture. The moment a wave of anxiety regarding your responsibilities or a fear of the future arises, instead of allowing your sympathetic nervous system to spiral into a state of hyperarousal, the fight or flight response, you engage the power of observation. This act of seeing creates what psychologists call psychological distancing. In this space of distancing, you begin to recognize that there is a process of worrying occurring right now, rather than believing, "I am worried." This subtle shift in syntax within your own mind is incredibly powerful. By observing the thought as a neutral event without adding fuel through further contemplation and without trying to suppress it through resistance, the stress response naturally begins to dissipate. This is the essence of somatic regulation, using the mind to settle the body. It is the ultimate freedom that comes from no longer being a prisoner to your own mental constructs. You might be wondering, how do we practically bridge the gap between this theory and the reality of a turbulent emotional day? How do we construct this distance when the mental storm feels overwhelming? I want to share a few techniques that are elegant in their simplicity, yet profound in their neurobiological impact. The first is a practice often referred to as a brain dump. This involves the rapid, unedited externalization of your internal dialogue onto paper.
From a cognitive perspective, when you translate abstract, swirling thoughts into concrete words on a physical medium, you are forcing your prefrontal cortex to engage in a top-down processing maneuver. The moment you see those words staring back at you from outside of yourself, the illusion of "I am the thought" begins to shatter. You start to view them as mere data points, mental phenomena that, while present, no longer possess the authority to dictate your state of being. Another sophisticated approach involves the meticulous observation of the word "I" or "me" as it infiltrates your thought patterns. Consider how often phrases like "I am so overwhelmed," "I must succeed," or "I am not enough" echo in your mind. That little word "I" is the glue that facilitates cognitive fusion. I want you to try recalibrating your mental perspective by noticing the "I" as just another component of a sentence rather than the core of your identity. In clinical practices like acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, we sometimes use a metaphor involving a radio. Ask yourself, if this stress were simply the broadcast of a radio station playing in the background of the room, would I feel compelled to believe every word the announcer says? Would I let that broadcast run my life? This inquiry diminishes the perceived sanctity of the thought. It strips the thought of its power and invites you back into the seat of the true observer. The consistent practice of mindfulness, therefore, is not merely about achieving a temporary state of relaxation or calm. It is a form of neurohacking, a deliberate and systematic recalibration of your brain's operating system. Through this work, you transition from a reactive mode, where you are a victim of every emotional impulse, to a reflective mode characterized by stability and insight. You develop a refined sense of interoception, the ability to perceive the internal state of your body and mind with clarity. And perhaps most importantly, you reclaim the power of choice. You earn the right to decide whether you will respond to a situation with wisdom and maturity, or whether you will simply let the thought pass by, much like watching a car drive by without the impulsive need to jump inside and let it take you away. Always remember, mindfulness is not about exerting control over your life to make it conform to your desires. It is about the radical awakening to life as it is actually unfolding, in all its complexity. When you relinquish the need to control, you finally gain the ability to see, and in that seeing, you find a profound, unshakable liberty.
As we move deeper into this exploration, it is crucial to understand that this journey of seeing, rather than being your thoughts, is not merely a mental exercise. It is a deeply somatic experience. Our thoughts and our physiology are inextricably linked in a continuous, unbroken feedback loop. When we talk about mindfulness here at Simply Mindful, we are talking about a full body awakening. This brings us to a critical concept in neuroscience known as interoception. Interoception is essentially our sixth sense. It is the brain's sophisticated ability to perceive the internal state of the body with granular detail. It is the reason you feel that sudden fluttering in your stomach the moment you feel nervous. It is the subtle, almost imperceptible tightening in your chest when a stressful thought first arises. For the average person, these physical sensations happen entirely outside of conscious awareness. They immediately trigger a chain reaction. A tight chest leads to shallow, restricted breathing. This sends an immediate signal to the brain that there is an active threat in the environment. The brain, acting on this signal, produces even more anxious thoughts. It becomes a closed loop of escalation, a cycle of stress that feeds upon itself. However, when you begin to cultivate a robust meta-awareness, you learn to use interoception as your early warning system. Instead of being swept away by the sudden storm, you notice the very first drop of rain. You might pause and think to yourself, I notice a sensation of constriction in my solar plexus. By labeling the sensation accurately, rather than reacting to it instinctively, you are preventing your autonomic nervous system from sliding into a full sympathetic surge.
You are no longer a passive victim of your own biology. You have become the conscious steward of your nervous system. You learn the profound art of staying present with discomfort without the desperate, compulsive need to fix it or escape from it. This is exactly where true resilience is built. It is found in the capacity to remain the sky when your body feels the thunder of a powerful emotion. This process allows us to enter a state of what psychologists call psychological flexibility. When we are fused with our thoughts, we are rigid. We react the same way every single time. But as the observer, we gain the necessary space to ask a vital question. Is this thought helpful? Note that I did not ask if the thought is true. Many of our most stressful and debilitating thoughts are technically true in a narrow, literal sense, but they are often utterly unhelpful to the person you are trying to become in this present moment. By shifting our focus from the content of the thought to the function of the thought, we effectively disarm the ego. We stop the exhausting internal argument with ourselves. We stop trying to think our way out of a thinking problem. I want you to consider a powerful distinction between the thinking self and the observing self. The thinking self is the part of you that plans, judges, remembers, and worries. It is like a novelist writing a never-ending book about your life. The observing self, on the other hand, is the one reading the book. The novelist might write a tragic, heartbreaking chapter, but the reader is not actually in the tragedy. The reader remains safe, grounded, and secure in their chair. By identifying with the observing self, you create an unshakable sanctuary within the landscape of your own mind. This is not about being cold. It is not about being detached. It is about being radically present without being radically overwhelmed. Everything we have discussed so far leads us to a single, pivotal realization. Mindfulness is not a destination. It is not about achieving a state where your mind is perfectly still or devoid of thought. That is a common misconception. True mindfulness, the kind we practice here at Simply Mindful, is about the radical acceptance of the mind's movement. It is about being the host who welcomes every guest into the house without becoming the guest themselves. When you sit in stillness and you notice a thought of anger, or perhaps a pang of regret, instead of turning away, you turn toward it with a sense of curiosity. You might say to yourself, "Interesting, there is a somatic sensation of heat in my chest. There is a narrative of injustice playing in my mind." In that very moment, the shift happens. You have moved from being the anger to being the one who is aware of the anger. This is the meta-awareness we've been exploring. This is your remote control. As we conclude this session, I want to leave you with a profound truth. You do not need to fix your thoughts. You do not need to fight your emotions. You only need to wake up to the fact that you are the space in which they occur. The clouds cannot hurt the sky. The movie cannot burn the screen. And your thoughts, no matter how dark or heavy they may feel, cannot diminish the essence of who you truly are. Practice this seeing throughout your day. When you are stuck in traffic, when you are waiting in line, when you are feeling the pressure of a deadline, step back, find the sidewalk, watch the cars go by. Remember, you are the sky, and the sky is always wide, always open, and always free. Thank you for joining me today on this journey into the architecture of the mind. If you found value in this exploration, please consider subscribing to Simply Mindful. Share this with someone who might need a little more space in their life today. I am Maya. Until next time, stay mindful, stay present, and keep being the sky. Goodbye for now.